Hello, friends. What do you do when you are a burnt out educator? Welcome to episode 12 of the Heartbeats of Adapted PE podcast. I'm so excited that you are here joining us today. I'm your host, Jen Heebink. And for those of you joining on YouTube on my live stream, I'm going to have slides going for the next hour of this podcast. For those of you on Spotify or Apple, you can just tune in, relax, and just kind of take it all in. I am your host, Jen Heebink, and I am a full-time adapted PE teacher 40 minutes west of Minneapolis. The Heartbeats of Adapted PE podcast is a podcast where we aim to connect, inspire, and amplify adapted PE teacher voices and those who support all students. We want to celebrate the heart, which is the storytelling, and the beat, celebrating the daily rhythms of our routine in our essential field. The Heartbeats of Adapted PE is brought to you one time per month by our sponsor, Fit and Fun Playscapes. Their mission, much like ours, is to support all students in this movement. Please go check them out. If you listened to episode 11, our previous episode, you heard Tanya Sands, a parent, advocate, and visionary who has an incredible daughter with an intellectual disability. Tanya shared about how movement and relationships impacted her daughter and her growth into the young lady that Aubrey is today. But I also kind of took from that podcast that interabled relationships impacted her daughter so much at school that she decided to take on some of the same frameworks that we use in adapted PE and unified PE and take them into her community and church. It is an absolute tear-jerking episode, and the way that Tanya shares her story, Aubrey's story, and their family story will pull at your heart for the full hour and 5 minutes. I would love for you to check that episode out on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. But today, I'm doing something different, and I don't have a guest to introduce. You get to hear from me today. I'm excited to bring you some of the tools, frameworks, and deep thoughts that I have gone through, brought me through some of those 16 years of teaching. It's been a long time, feels like a lifetime, right? But I'm only not even halfway through my teaching career. But we've been through it a little bit. So, and honestly, because of all that is happening in Minnesota and what we're kind of going through right now with where we live, and again, another unprecedented time. Gosh, I thought it would be a great time this month to just take a break from interviewing guests and really just share some of the beat behind the Heartbeats of Adapted PE podcast. The beat, obviously, sharing the just daily rhythms and some of the things that we have to deal with in our essential field. So for the next hour or so, I want to share how I have gotten through some of the hardest times in my teaching, in how I problem solve, regulate, and think about how I work best. And I'm no expert by any means, but I will say I've taught through some of the biggest ups and downs of the last couple years. And so I know I'm not the only one. And so I'm going to take us on a little adventure today. So up on my live stream right now, I have a picture of a roller coaster. And if you think of the last time you were on a roller coaster, what was that like for you? I remember one of the first times I was on a roller coaster, and it was tough, like I kind of some unexpected ups and downs. And the thing that we teach in health education, for those of you who are in health, I am not, but I remember teaching stress and de-stress, right? We have good stress and bad stress. But how do you teach when you are experiencing the highs and lows that roller coaster of teaching will bring you? And sometimes the roller coaster of teaching is literally, that day you're experiencing ups and downs all throughout the day. But sometimes the roller coaster is just like life outside of teaching. And how does that affect you, right? And so when you experience something stressful, how can you bring your nervous system back down to homeostasis, so to speak? Same with those lows. Like, you're going to have low points, stress, grieving, sleepless nights that happen while teaching. But we need to learn how to regulate so that we can restore feeling safe in our own bodies. How do you teach through grief, loss, depression, anxiety, difficult situations? On my next slide here, for those of you just tuning in from Apple and Spotify, I have a graph kind of looking object image on my screen, and it is a circle. It's like looks like a pie graph, and it has literally every kind of emotion that you could possibly imagine on it. And so with that, I borrowed that image from my friend Shiloh Webb, and much of the information I'm sharing today comes from her company Inner Matter. She is a social and emotional learning creative and is just incredible when it comes to social and emotional learning. But a huge lesson I've learned over the years is that when students are in survival brain mode, where they've had trauma or they're just having a really hard day, maybe they haven't eaten in some time or slept very good in some time, like they're having a hard day, we are not in a place of learning. And so we have to return to kind of that frontal lobe before we can start to learn and be successful. So part of that is actually identifying emotions, and identifying emotions is a huge lesson for my students to return to the frontal lobe of learning. If we can identify what we're feeling, we can deal with it, right? But also, as I'm learning about emotions for my students, I realized like I don't know how to identify my own emotions, like this a couple of years ago. And so I did just a deep dive into understanding my own emotions. Did you know Brene Brown, who's Dr. Brene Brown, who's just an amazing researcher and incredible person all around. One of her quotes from her books that I took says that adults can only identify an average of 3 emotions. Can you imagine that? Like, think about it for yourself. Like, most adults can only identify maybe if they're happy, sad, and scared. And when we can't identify the other emotions, they kind of like get away from us and come out sideways. So one thing that she says that I have taken and really applied to my life is that when we name an emotion, we can tame the emotion. And it's really true. Like, otherwise they kind of come out sideways when we can't identify them. So when we can identify our emotion, we can tame it, and having an understanding of our own emotions helps us be able to self-regulate and can only help us become better teachers as we help our students self-regulate too, right? So self-regulation is a term that we use to understand when I am feeling this emotion, I take that action. For example, when I feel angry, I need a break under my weighted blanket. When I feel happy, I can easily move throughout my tasks for the day. So it's simply just identifying, I'm happy, I'm disgusted, I'm tired, right? When I feel this, I do that. Or even just identifying if I can't take care of my emotion right now, then maybe at the end of class, I need to take 5 minutes, go get a drink of water, and then I'll be good to come back, right? So identifying that. And here's the thing. There are so many different ways that you can ride the teaching and stress roller coaster when you have those emotions, right? So I'm going to click forward to this picture of the roller coaster, going back to the roller coaster. We have different ways that we can ride that emotional roller coaster. Teaching is a roller coaster. Emotions are a roller coaster, but we have kind of this homeostasis that we do when we're feeling good, right? So if you are riding this teaching adventure from the front of the roller coaster, it feels like this grand adventure, right? You're on the front of the roller coaster. You can see all the twists and turns ahead clearly. You can see all the problems that are being solved. You can see all problems and you can solve them, and how you can solve them, right? You feel supported. Your values are valued. Your passion is seen and experienced throughout the school, and no interference of your own goals. Man, that feels good. We are well regulated. When I feel this, I can do that and have no problem that needs to be solved, because you can deal with any problem that needs to be solved because you have a supportive team around you, right? So that is the front of the roller coaster. When you are riding this teaching roller coaster, in the middle of the roller coaster, you have, those cars ahead of you and you have those cars behind you. But it feels like you kind of got it, but you're also kind of feeling stuck without the resources to help. So you can't always see all the twists and turns that are coming. You can definitely like kind of turn your head a little bit and see what's happening behind you. Maybe you have a little less passion and you're just slightly supported, and you might have some interference from the front and the back. And it's less ability to see those problems coming, right? Now, when you're riding in the back of the roller coaster, man, we're in survival mode, right? We feel like the roller coaster is just dragging us. We're in survival mode. We're in compassion fatigue. We're in a reactive state. We are a victim of our circumstances, feeling the net force and the speed of being in the back, no control over our circumstances. We can look back to see where everything and everyone has been, but we have many problems, no solutions in sight, and we're feeling alone, maybe a little bit isolated in our problems. To my listeners, this far into the school year, what part of the roller coaster have you been riding in? What a deep question, right? When you start to think about it, you're like, oh, when I show up to school, what am I feeling? What emotions am I feeling? And what part of the roller coaster am I riding in thus far into the school year? Has it been in the front, where you feel like you can see every curve and every problem, you're supported and have problem solving done successfully? Are you in the middle of the roller coaster where you feel like there's a lot going on, but you still are kind of hanging in there? Or are you in the back, unsupported, barely surviving every single day? If you're in the back, what are you going to do about it? We got to do something. Who can you talk to help you through that? Is it a self-care and rest issue, or is there more going on? What can we do about it? So here's the thing, friends. The more that we become aware of our own emotions, along with what we value in life, the more we can lead ourselves and others well. You know, in 2017, I think back to this year, and I just remember just being angry and tired and definitely riding in the back of the roller coaster. I was all burnt out, but I didn't like really recognize that. I just felt like angry every day. I'm like, ugh, you know, just so much going on at school. I was fresh off postpartum anxiety and depression, which I still honestly can't believe I made it through. That was tough. And I actually remember walking out of my buildings asking myself, like, why am I feeling this way? And I realized I was the only one making myself feel that way. I was choosing to feel that way about my circumstances. And I realized, like, I just need to get out to some kind of professional development. I need a fresh idea. I need something, right? So attending our home Mandate conference in 2017 gave me an idea to try. I felt like our school was just in the right spot. And it was unified physical education. It was a moment where my students felt like they could help each other, and the culture was at a just right point where I could try something new. And so unified students, unified PE is a class students with and without disabilities in their least restrictive environment, of course, where they come together in one class with a heart for meaningful inclusion. And it filled my soul and changed the whole culture of my school, along with several of the staff. It became kind of contagious. And people noticed good stuff happening. And sometimes when you're in that down in the dumps back of the roller coaster, sometimes you just need a fresh idea. You need to get out, right? For me, it was just attending that PD. So it really, like I said, one idea, it changed my perspective. And once I had that, it became contagious. The whole culture of the school was impacted. It really just brought fresh purpose. So again, what part of the roller coaster are you riding on? And one thing I have realized is that the one thing that will bring us to the front of the roller coaster is hope. Hope is going to bring us to the front of the roller coaster, friends. And what are some ways that we can find hope? Because what I've realized is that for me, it looks like a lot of different things. It looks like advocating, not complaining. It means taking care of my mental health through self-care and therapy. I need physical health with my movement, working out, doing yoga, my spiritual life through my faith journey, taking a step with my spiritual life gives me a refresh all the time. Socially, I learned the hard way. This was a suggestion by my therapist. I need to have a support system of at least 5 relationships I trust. And that's just not, surface level. You need to have 5 people out, maybe outside of your family members, even friends that you trust. Do you have that? And then something I've discovered lately is joy stacking. If I have a heck of a week, friends, and I feel like I have been in the back of the roller coaster for the week, I will joy stack. And that just means taking a half a day, a whole day. If I'm lucky, my kiddos go out of town with my husband. And I do all the things that bring me joy and no one stops me. So I am walking through the woods. I call it like forest bathing, whatever. It's just hiking in the woods. Maybe I bring like a cup of tea with me. I draw. I'm not good at it, but it's something I can do and I can throw away when I'm done. But maybe it's painting. Maybe it's playing a musical instrument. I love singing when no one else is around, of course. And so joy stacking is one of those things that I've learned, like when I have a really just crappy week, I need to do things that bring me joy. And so with that, I want to ask you to check your emotions again. And this time I want you to use this framework. I have a couple of frameworks that will help you kind of visualize how to ride that roller coaster well. So someone once showed me and explained to me that when we are regulated, we have kind of these zones, right? People have used zones of regulation. I want to make it even more simple for ourselves as teachers. I want you to imagine a ruler and it goes from 1 inch to 10 inches. And from the first 1, 2, and 3 inches, that is where we are chilled out, right? That's blue zone. We are we're under challenged, right? We're chilling out, we're relaxing, we're reading books. And then the upper zone is like 7 to 10. Okay. And then the middle zone is the yellow zone where we are kind of challenged a little bit. But again, that 8 to 10, 7 to 10 is where we're really over challenged. The red zone, right, is what I call it. And so in thinking about that like a ruler, 1 through 3 blue, 3 through 7 or 8 yellow, and the rest up to 10 in the red zone, being able to identify like what color I'm in and what level I'm on has been kind of a game changer for myself. So in summer, most of us will be in the blue zone, right? 1 through 3. But in thinking back to those of us that taught through the pandemic, maybe in 2020, 2021, 2022 COVID years, all of us actually returned to work already at a 6. And we were well on our way to being burnt out already before we even started. And honestly, for those of us who have a hard time resting through the summer and we just continue to work all summer, we might feel already burnt out by the time we get to the school year. So once we recognize those triggers that we're beginning to get burnt out in the 8 to 10 range, maybe it's emotional numbness, maybe it's some racing thoughts, higher heart rate, dissociation, we have to kind of figure out a way to come back. We can't just keep going in the red zone. And so I'm not a doctor and this is not medical advice. So if you have more questions about this kind of stuff or if you're anxious or whatever, please seek out medical doctors. But you should ask your doctor about those symptoms if you're having them. But for me, I needed some good therapy and some Jesus and a lot of new hobbies. I realized I didn't have any hobbies. And so I was struggling a lot when I had no hobbies. There was no hope and I was just kind of angry, but looking back in those kind of hard times, I recognized like that was the beginning of my transformation to who I am today and feeling like myself. And so something to also recognize is that some of us work best when we are chilled out in the blue zone, 1 to 3 on that ruler. Some of us work best in the yellow zone, and most of us are going to work best when we're right on the edge of that yellow and red zone, right about 7 or 7.5. I know I need to be challenged a little bit with urgency to get stuff done. And so sometimes working in this 7 to 7.5 zone works the best for me. But honestly, just recognizing where you work best is a skill that we need to kind of recognize sometimes. So the next slide I'm going to show you is kind of a image from a book that I read with a group of educators from the high school that I work at. It is a image from the book Onward, and it talks about it's by Alina Aguilar, and it has this visual of the bottom being like a graph that goes by month. So like every little tick has October, November, December, January, and then there's like graph that talks about what we are feeling and what level we are feeling in that zone. And so I kind of want to talk about it because I think it's really, really important to understand that that everybody experiences different emotions all throughout the school year as teachers. And so this Onward, it's Onward, the book is Onward, Cultivating Resilience in Educators by Alina Aguilar. And I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. But on my YouTube right now, like that's what I have pulled up. And it's really the demonstration of the roller coaster of emotions of a first year teacher. But in looking at it, I really think that all teachers kind of experience this in some form. And what it shows is that, in August and September, we have this anticipation phase where we're getting really excited to teach, and it's fun, and you're looking forward to meeting the kids. And then we get out to October and November, and we kind of bottom out. We are disillusioned. And pause for a second. Between September and October, there's this survival phase, right? So it's anticipation in August, survival in September, because we're just like figuring it out. And then October and November are this definite like disillusionment. And it's the bottom of the graph. Okay. So we get to the point in this disillusionment where it was like, this isn't what I signed up for. And then in December, we start to climb out of this disillusionment into some rejuvenation. And by April and May, we hit the reflection stage and we realize, yeah, I just did that. Like, wow, I survived. I did it. And we hit the anticipation cycle again. And that is how this kind of cycle works for a first year teacher, but also in looking at it, like, I feel that almost every single year. And I think those of us who taught through the pandemic, we probably spent more time in survival and disillusionment and just all over anticipation of anxiety. So that was probably more flatline disillusionment rather than going down and up in anticipation. But I think overall it's pretty accurate and honest. And I think just looking at it once in a while helps me remember that, number one, I'm human and that I'm a teacher and everybody does this. It's not all sweet. It's hard work. But nothing will teach us more about life, I think, than being a teacher itself, truly. So moving forward, when we recognize that we have these emotions at different times of the year, I think it's also important to understand like what you value. Right? Because first comes identifying emotions on this roller coaster journey, but second is remembering what you value. And so clarifying your values, understanding what you value, when you know you value your value and what you value, you can lead yourself and others well. And so for me, it's faith, connection, family. There are some other words on the screen of just so many different values. Maybe it's kindness, maybe it's learning, maybe, there's just so many different things that someone can value, and some of them kind of tie together really well. But if you could pick like 3 values, what would they be? And what would they be in the core of your being? What does it look like when your values do not reflect your department's values, though? It can be exhausting and problem solving can get hard. You can lead yourself well, but also when other people have different values, that's really, really hard. But when we clarify our values, it allows us to spend more time funneling our energy into the things that we care about. When we understand what our department and administration value, it can actually bring out emotions or connect us to the mission of what we do better. So maybe it connects us to our own mission, but maybe it connects us to our admin mission better, right? Some of us, many of us, not only taught through the pandemic, but also in the late 2010s, most of us who were teaching spent a time in a PD somewhere working on our why. That was a huge, huge PD, right? For a lot of us over those couple of years, we sat in a PD and we were like, oh, we got to figure out why we do this. Okay. So what we figured out during that time was that our why we teach has to be deeper than because the kids need it or it's for the kids. For me, after I figured out what I value at the core of my being, I was able to plug those values into a reflective statement. My why I teach is if I want my students to connect, belong, and be brave, then I need to be brave first. And so, of course, back then, my values were connecting, belonging, being brave, courageous, all those things. And honestly, I've had to be so brave so many times. And the really cool thing about this during this time, I actually got a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, which I should have been diagnosed with in elementary school. Teaching myself to be brave, quite literally as a skill, changed my whole world for the better. And in doing so, I've seen my students be brave and change their whole world in the process as well. Because when you think about it, like when you have to be brave about something, you step into that situation and you become a different person on the other side. And so being brave has always been close to my core value. So in talking about your values, if you can get those core values to the core of yourself and lead into yourself, you can lead out well. So I have another framework here on my screen that I want to talk about, and it's called leading in and leading out. Leading in to lead out. So when I know that when I don't lead myself well, I don't lead others well, right? So leading in leads to leading out one layer out, but then also it could be 2 layers out and sometimes more. And I want to explain more about that. So to start in this framework, my values are at the core in the center of my framework, right? They're at the core of who I am. They help me make all my decisions. And then when I apply that to my teaching and lead myself well inward from the places that I've learned, maybe it's pieces from a PD that I'm like, oh, I need to get that into my teaching. Or maybe it's just taking care of my mental health or physical health or spiritual health. I realized that when I lead well, my students learn well. And if students are really, really engaged and loving what they're learning, they're going to teach their siblings or their friends what they learned when they're really engaged, right? So I teach my students and students share a fact or something to their siblings. And now you're leading 2 layers down. And when we lead ourselves well and our colleagues notice, this reaches 1 layer outward, right? Almost like you're holding hands and kind of passing off that knowledge to your colleagues. And so when we lead our colleagues well, they might bring that to their department, right? It becomes something beyond ourselves. And so to our colleagues is 1 layer out, but to their departments and maybe beyond that is 2 layers out. And then you can lead yourself upward to your admin when you advocate, when you have supportive admin who see what we're all about and we teach our students well, like we lead up with our mission, right? We advocate, we meet their own mission, right? Or, upon hearing us supportively, we teach them too. And then it goes really well up to the superintendent or maybe the school board. And that is 2 layers and beyond, right? So sometimes we are teaching upward, advocating upward, and we teach them too. And again, when it goes really well up to the superintendent and the school board, that's leading ourselves well, so it goes upward, right? Sometimes we advocate so well, we find people coming to us that we don't even know, like news stations and media, and it goes well beyond the two layers. So lead in to lead out. Lead yourself well and lead others well. So one kind of big, deep thought is, why do people follow others? Take a minute to think about that, friends. Why do other people follow others? Maybe it's even on social media. I follow this person because, or maybe you've just found some friends in real life, in person, but it's leading with trust, stability, compassion, and hope. Right? People follow others when they are trustworthy, when they prove, stability, when they're compassionate, and when they can find hope in that person. So a lot of times I will ask myself, how am I leading myself professionally, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and socially? For me, it's going to a PD. It's self-care, doing my hobbies, taking care of myself, taking time for myself, working out. Maybe it's praying and reading my Bible, and that's me, right? And maybe it's just scheduling time with friends. When the good stuff stays at the core of who I am, it seems like good things follow. So now I want to talk about passion. Passion is interesting, right? We all have our topics and the hills that we will die on. But what I want to share with listeners right now is that passion alone is irritating. Have you ever noticed that before? When you have a new initiative or a large problem that you are passionate about solving, think about it like an elephant, right? If you take your passion to someone else and you're like, oh, here's the elephant, and you try and push that elephant on your own, that elephant's not going anywhere. Right? So you can't move it on your own. If you push a leg with your passion, you're going to get stepped on, because that's irritating, right? I'm going to squash you like a bug, and your passion's going to be squashed. If you pull on the trunk of an elephant, maybe you get spit on. And if you pull the tail, you might get pooped on. And that's not working. So what do we do? Passion alone is irritating. So for me, I applied this directly to becoming a champion unified school with Special Olympics. And this is just where I'm at in my life. I know that there are some different things going on in other parts of the country unified, but this has been so good for my program. I had to think about creating a new program using this elephant framework. I thought of this problem as an elephant. So one day after I had attended that MNDAPE professional development in 2017, I walked into our AP's office to ask what I could do to make unified PE happen. She said, because I just thought, well, I have this idea, let's try it. I'm just going to work this on my own, right? No. She said that I needed to have the special education department support, the physical education department support. I need kids to sign up for the class, and I need everyone to be knowledgeable, right? Then our stakeholders and parents at IEP meetings were informed once I had all that support. And at that point, that's when the elephant started to walk. That's when the problem started to move. That's when the initiative started to form and kind of be more of like, oh, this dream is going to come true, right? Once Unified PE began, the class started, the elephant absolutely ran. And when I tell you this elephant ran, now we have a whole staff who teaches different classes of unified programming. So what I had and how I led myself during that time and how I got support from all the different areas of the elephant moved the elephant forward. And now there's so many different programming and classes and clubs that are inclusive of all students, it kind of just, the elephant is running and running all to the different departments. So we can't solve problems without finding support on all sides of the elephant. When we try and push the elephant on our own, we are going to be exhausted. Passion alone is irritating. You need to find support on all sides of the elephant. So my question for you in reflecting on this framework, what is your elephant this year? What's your problem that you want to solve? And I want you to just think about that, because for me right now, I'm just like having some outside of the school stuff. I was on jury duty. We have things going on in Minnesota that are just really tough to deal with outside of school. Yeah. So the elephant can be many different kinds of initiatives and things that you are trying to overcome. So that is the elephant. And the next framework that I want to share with you is called the hedgehog. It's affectionately called the hedgehog because I love the hedgehog. It's kind of like this Venn diagram, but with 3 circles that kind of all slightly overlap. And in the middle is kind of the sweet spot. I'm going to describe what that looks like. Okay, so one circle in this Venn diagram asks, what are you passionate about? Okay, and then when you scoot to the next circle asks, what does success look like? And the last circle in this triad of overlapping circles asks, what are you best at? So first ask yourself all 3 of those questions separately, right? Then we're going to find ourselves in the middle of all 3 of those circles where they overlap. And again, that's your sweet spot. We get a touch of all 3 of those circles, and the middle circle is where you're going to thrive. So when you start to shift towards one of those circles, let's say we shift to, I'm passionate about this, right? We just talked about how passion is irritating unless you have support from the rest of the elephant. Well, the thing is, if you move towards just passion and you forget what success looks like or what you're best at, you're going to burn out. And if you move to what you're best at, but you forget what you're passionate about and you forget what success looks like for your students, you're gonna burn out. And when you move towards success, but you forget what you're best at and what you're passionate about, guarantee you will burn out. And so what you need to do is ask yourself those 3 questions and get to the center of all 3 of those where they all overlap. And then you will find your full bucket of teaching, right? When it fills your soul. So for me, when the answers to these, the answer for the questions in these circles are a few different things. So I'm going to give you some examples. So I am passionate about inclusion and making sure everyone has meaningful connections through movements. I am most successful when my students have a safe and intentional connecting learning environment and community of students to depend on. I am best at teaching my students with appropriate equipment in the environment that works best, leading to more understanding and successful movement. So I have found my sweet spot in the middle of all 3 of those circles. I find that when I move towards just one of those circles, I lose my passion. And for me, that's a sign of burnout. When you catch yourself moving out of the sweet spot, reflect on all 3 of those questions again. And what am I passionate about? What am I best at? And what am I most successful? And I can guarantee you're going to find yourself back in the middle of your sweet spot. The next thing I want to share with you about burnout is understanding other people's stories. And so perception, on the screen right now, I have a picture of 2 cartoon people arguing over the number 6 and 9, and they are on the opposite sides of the number. One is yelling, "That's a 9," and the other one says, "That's a 6." And it's all because of the way that they're looking at things, right? So when understanding burnout, I've used this 6-9 method to understand my perception and others' perception. The 6-9 perception is understanding that the way we grow up and experience the world influences the way that you see the world, right? Ourselves. If I see the world one way because of the way I grew up, it influences how I see the rest of the world. Okay. So if I walk into the room from the northern door, I'm walking into the gym, there's a north door, and there is a number on the floor, I would recognize it as a 6 because I came from the north. I grew up in the north with northern cultures, food, finances, living situations. But if someone walks into the room from the southern door, they have current perception and the way that they have their current perception and the way that the world has influenced them to see the number 9. The only way to common ground is to notice, right? Ask questions and walk to the other side of the number. So that number 9 friend has walked in with southern culture, food, finances, living situation from the south, right? We have a northern understanding and a southern understanding. And that's going to influence the way that we see this number. Okay. So the only way to find common ground again is to notice and ask questions, walk to the other side of the room, right? If you're from the north, you walk around to the southern side of the room and you ask for a conversation over a cup of coffee and you ask them, can you help me understand why you see the number as a 9, right? And maybe later, the friend from the south walks around to the northern side of the room and they ask to start understand why you see it as a 6. And so having that different perception and understanding multiple views has really, really helped me understand people's stories. So walk to the other side of the room, walk to the other side of the number, ask questions, notice other people, friends. The next thing I want to share is I hate making mistakes. I don't know about you all, but I just really hate making mistakes. Something that I've talked to other people about is this strategy called zooming out. And maybe you've heard about it. But zooming out is kind of an important strategy for myself because it helps me put things into perspective, right? So on the screen right now, I have a picture of our Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul. And it's the building. And I also split the screen with Google Maps zoomed out to show you where the state capitol actually is on the map. And when I make a mistake, I remember myself, I remind myself that so much of this time when I make a mistake, it's a very small problem in the grand scheme of life. And when I zoom out, like when I'm on my computer, when I'm on my phone and I recognize man, I'm just, at this school and I'm zooming out and there's this great big world, it helps me understand that it's not that big of a deal, and when it does feel like a big deal or I do need to take responsibility, I take responsibility and I take action steps to help my anxiety. But I'm thinking back to, at the end of the school year, sometimes I just need to get away from, this normal life. And so sometimes we'll take a road trip and we'll go to Colorado, and we'll just sit in the mountains. I remember this one time we went up surrounded by 14ers in Colorado Springs, and I just sat and looked and realized I am so small. I have to get into a place where the earth and everything around me just feels so much bigger than myself so that I can kind of get myself out of, the regular day and life activities, right? And it just helps me put things into perspective a little better. So get away from the common life sometimes and just put yourself in a place where I would say, creation is bigger than myself. Helps me see that, right? And now is to the point of the show where I want to talk about, the takeaways. This is, in fact, my first solo show, and I've had a blast, by the way. This has been so much fun. But some of my takeaways from this podcast, if you are a burnt out teacher, here are some things that maybe you could take away from this podcast too. I would remember, identify and be responsible for your own emotions. Do something with them and to help them. So often, specifically millennials, maybe not millennials, but it seems like we grew up in a time where showing our emotion was really not accepted. And we always had to be in a place of strength. And so to show vulnerability and weakness feels like we shouldn't be doing that. But really, like when we lead from vulnerability, it actually makes us stronger. And so be responsible for your actions, be responsible for your emotions. What part of the roller coaster are you teaching in this year? Are you in the front, the middle, or the back? Hope is the only way to move us from the back of the roller coaster to the front, where everything is clear and you can see a way through things. Clarify your values. What is at the core of your being that is so, so important? Passion alone is irritating. You don't, if you need to know what your passion is about. What are you passionate about? And what are you best at? And what are you successful in? And when you find the answer to those 3 questions, you will find your sweet spot. What about perception? How you grew up shapes how you see life. Walk to the other side of the number, to the other side of the room, and have conversations to understand people with different stories and different perceptions than you. When you make a mistake, zoom out. Recognize that, is it really that big of a problem? And if it is, then maybe take responsibility and take some action steps to take from that, to move forward from that. And, thinking through this podcast, and, I didn't have this on my list of takeaways, but I think life, when you compare the things that you go through, like life is hard, right? Teaching is hard. I want you to think about just a pile of clay. It's in your hands, right? And maybe you're molding your teaching into a bowl, and you have all these experiences, and you can make whatever you want out of this clay. And sometimes the clay breaks, and needs to be healed. And sometimes you have different designs and everything, but you put it into the fire, right? The clay has to go into the fire before it can be transformed into something that is to be used, right? I think teaching is such a huge refining process. When clay goes into the fire, it's refined into something beautiful. And I think when we take care of ourselves, sometimes we go through this roller coaster, but we experience things that are hard and break us. And we need to move forward to figure out a way to heal. And we go through the fire, but then we come out something beautiful when we're healed. And so take care of yourself, friends. So today was different and good to be here with you on my first solo podcast. I'm glad that you were able to join me. There have been so many times over the last 16 years that I've found myself in the back of the roller coaster, trying to find my way forward. And though some of these reflective frameworks and finding my support systems have helped me a lot, and they help me find that front of the roller coaster again. And I hope it does that for you too. I'm not an expert in all this, but I do have my own story of ups and downs. And when we share them and how we deal with them, maybe we won't feel quite so alone. And gosh, thank you for joining me, because it's good to be reflective sometimes. And thank you to all of our listeners who have been listening or rewatching or listening at a later date. I also just want to say thank you to Fit and Fun Playscapes and to Pam for joining us on this amazing journey for this podcast. Pam Gunther over at Fit and Fun Play. You can find them at Fit and Fun Play on X. And I also just want to share the different ways that you can connect with us. So you can find us on our social media and YouTube channels, along with the Health and Physical Education Collective for live interaction, along with post-podcast interaction. So you can find us on X and Blue Sky at Heartbeats of APE. You can find us on YouTube, which is youtube.com at Heartbeats of Adapted PE Podcast. And then you can find us, just if you need to connect through email, heartbeatsofadaptedpe@gmail.com. And again, shout out to the Health and Physical Education Collective. I'm going to be putting our event over there as well. Did you know you can also find this podcast on Shape America on their YouTube page? And so there are multiple ways that you can enjoy our podcast. And you can find us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And those are just all the different ways that you can find us. So I hope that you enjoyed this podcast and that you've maybe taken some tools and strategies and stories that'll help you on your journey on this roller coaster of teaching through your years. Thank you so much, friends.